the anniversary of that. And I remember vividly when it happened, and I guess we all did watch the television coverage. And there was something that really struck me about that, and it reminds me. I mean, I've heard thinking like this expressed quite a lot, but as I was watching the television coverage back the day afterwards, I saw a couple of Christian leaders, and I'm not going to mention their names because you would know who they are. You would recognize their names if I told you. Well-known, famous people. They were on CNN or one of those channels, with a split screen. And one of them said to the other one, "This is God's judgment against America because of sin." And the other one nodded and said, "Yes, it is." And I was, frankly, I was horrified to hear that. I couldn't believe I was hearing it. But on the other hand, I could believe it because I've heard that a lot. And it's a common way of thinking. And what I'm getting ready to tell you, and I'll tell you the punchline first. I'm going to tell you that is, even though it's common thinking, it's obsolete thinking. And I want to explain to you why that's not right thinking, why it's obsolete thinking. But before I do that, let me tell you another one. I like to tell you things that I personally know about, rather than tell you things I've just heard about. I remember Y2K. Anybody remember Y2K? And in 1999, all the computers were going to fail, and the bank vaults were going to open, and the power plants weren't going to work, and nothing was, And again, I hate to say this. I mean, I don't like to be critical, but I'm going to be. I'm going to overcome my reluctance to be critical in order to make a point and be critical of a kind of thinking. I remember in 1999 in Tulsa, I was driving through Tulsa listening to Christian radio, listening to Christian leaders, just like it wasn't the same people, different people, and I could mention the names of who I knew who I was listening to. It was a round table discussing Y2K. And I remember one of them, I never will forget this, one of them said, "Well, if God doesn't judge America in Y2K, he's going to miss his best opportunity." And I guess he missed his best opportunity because, as you know, nothing happened. Remember that? And I'll tell you another story. You like my story so far? We'll get to the Bible in just a moment here. I mean, I usually start with a scripture, of course. This year we've had a pretty significant drought. I'm sure you know. And but we've had other ones. I remember other years where it hadn't rained for a while. And I remember one particular year we were going to have a prayer service. And I'm all for prayer. And but it could be we could get it over with pretty quick. We could all join hands and say, "Oh Lord, we need some rain. Thank you very much." And see y'all later. That's all really, that's about what's necessary. But I remember at this prayer service about the fact that it hadn't rained, the person that was speaking said, "Well, he said, in the Old Testament, God withheld the rain because of the sins of the people." And again, I was disturbed by that kind of thinking. And I'll tell you why. I'm getting ready to say, again, that is obsolete thinking. And I want to explain to you, see, it's not enough for me just to say it. I need to show you why. Because it's actually a pretty deep-rooted mode of thought that people have. And, I'm not really interested, mainly in how we assign or what we think about big national events. What I'm more interested in is how we think in our own life. Because in our own lives, there will be, if it hasn't happened already, there will be things that happen that are not pleasant or not good. There will be tragedies, there will be problems, there will be bad things that we confront in our lives. And you may have the temptation to think, why is God doing this to me? And I'm here to tell you today, it's not God doing it to you. In fact, God is the answer for the bad things that happen. He is not behind bad things that happen. He's not bringing bad things into our lives. He didn't cause 9/11. The very thought of that, I mean, that's just I don't understand the way, that's like, imagining God like an infant, having a temper tantrum, grabbing some planes and crashing into buildings or something. I can't even conceive, but I can. I can tell you where that kind of thought comes from. But before I do that, let me tell you some that I've read about. I'm reading a book right now about the San Francisco earthquake in 1906, a great earthquake in San Francisco. And I came to one part in the book, and this always gets my attention when I read about what the preachers are saying. And let's see, I got to read this. I'm going to read this quote to you. This was a man named Frank Bartleman, a preacher at the time, who wrote a pamphlet right immediately after the earthquake. He said, "I seem to feel the wrath of God against the people, and I came to withstand it in prayer." And that's another thought. It's kind of strange, if God's mad and he's going to judge America, but I'm going to hold him back. I mean, who do we think we are anyway, Now, before we you know, I don't want you to think too badly of the different people I kind of tacitly, or not tacitly, I criticized them, didn't I? Jesus' own disciples engaged in this same kind of obsolete thinking. And I want to show it to you, then I'll explain to you why it's obsolete. Phil, if you could, would you give me Luke's Gospel, chapter 9, and I'd like verse 51, I think. And it's so convenient. Phil will put the scriptures up here for us, and you can read them here. I almost feel like I need the big words now, or else I have to put my glasses on. Verse 51. This is talking about Jesus. And it said, it came to pass when the time was come that he should be received up, he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem. And he sent messengers before his face. And they went and entered into a village of the Samaritans to make ready for him. Now let me just stop right there and say that there was a certain kind of animosity between the Samaritans and the Jews. There was a certain kind of, it was almost like a denominational sort of a thing, because it goes back many, many years. They had their own temple, they had their own place of worship in Samaria, and the Jews worship in Jerusalem. You can see that when Jesus met the woman at the well. She said to him, she was shocked that he talked to her, because she was a Samaritan. And he said, you Jews say Jerusalem's the place where you should worship, but we worship here. And which way is it? You know, they were jealous and upset with one another. There was a lot of animosity. So when Jesus said he's going to Jerusalem, and he sent messengers before his face, verse 53 says, they did not receive him, because his face was as though he would go to Jerusalem. Now that's kind of mean, you know, that's not very nice. And the disciples didn't think that was very nice either. Look at what they said in verse 54. The disciples, James and John, when they saw this, they said, Lord, wilt thou that we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, even as Elias did? Now, let's just stop for a moment and consider what it is that they are saying. They are applying a scriptural precedent. In fact, I'd like to just read that. Phil, could you turn to, it's in 2 Kings chapter 1. We're going to come right back here again. And Phil will give me 2 Kings chapter, what they're referring to, and they want to apply the scriptural precedent from the Old Testament, which is the same kind of thinking that all the people I quoted to you are also thinking in Old Testament terms. But I'd like to show you what the disciples, James and John, pretty astute Bible students, they'd read their Bible, 2 Kings chapter 1. Let's just start in verse 1 here. It's a good story. I like a good story. 2 Kings chapter 1. Then Moab rebelled against Israel after the death of Ahab, and Ahaziah fell down through a lattice in his upper chamber that was in Samaria. This is the king of Samaria. At this time, the nation of Israel was divided into two kingdoms. Israel in the north, and Judah and Benjamin had Jerusalem in the south, and Ahaziah is the king now. And in Samaria, they made that the capital of Israel in the north. So he's the king, and he fell down through the lattice and was sick. That means he was injured, and he sent messengers and said to them, Go inquire Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, whether I shall recover this disease. Now you might know just instinctively, even if you don't know for sure, Beelzebub doesn't sound very nice, does it? That is that's the god of Ekron. In my Bible, there's a little number in the margin. It says the name literally means Lord of the Flies. Now, that doesn't sound very good either. That's kind of this as idol, this demonic, the Lord of the Flies doesn't sound very good. Whatever else you want to say about Beelzebub, that's a bad name. Anyway, this king, this is a bad thing he's doing here. Would you agree? He said, Send messengers and inquire Beelzebub, god of Ekron, whether I shall recover. But verse 3 says, The angel of the Lord said to Elijah, this is God's prophet, Elijah the Tishbite, Arise, go meet the messengers of the king of Samaria, and say to them, Is it not because there is not a God in Israel that you go and inquire Beelzebub, god of Ekron? This is a little bit of sarcasm on the part of God. He's sarcastically saying, oh, well, it's because there's no God. There's no God in Israel. That's why you have to go inquire this Lord of the Flies to ask if I'll get well, because you don't know God anymore. And so Elijah goes and tells the messengers that. Verse 4, Now therefore, thus saith the Lord, Thou shalt not come down from that bed on which thou art got up, for thou shalt surely die. And Elijah departed. Well, the messengers, I guess Elijah made an impression on them, because verse 5 says, They turned back unto him, that's the king. And they said unto him, he said, Why are you now turned back? And they said unto him, Well, there came a man to meet us. And he said to us, Go, turn again unto the king that sent you, and say to him, Thus saith the Lord, Is it not because there is not a God in Israel, that thou sendest to inquire Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Now, therefore, thou shalt not come down from that bed on which thou art gone up, but thou shalt surely die. Boy, they got it right, word for word.